Number 1, the monster study. Imagine being a kid just trying to get through speech class, and instead, you accidentally get recruited into a psychological horror story disguised as research. Back in 1939, because of course it was the 1930s, a man named Wendell Johnson decided to test his theory about stuttering, for science. So he and his grad student Mary Tudor, yes, her actual name, because apparently no one in this study had irony detectors, took 22 orphan children in Iowa and split them into two groups. One group got positive reinforcement, "You're speaking so well." The other group, they were told their perfectly normal speech was terrible. "You stutter, don't speak unless you can say it right." Helpful advice like that. Now here's where it gets disturbing. The kids who didn't stutter before, the ones in the negative group, started developing serious speech problems, like full-on anxiety, avoidance, and lifelong scars from being gaslit into thinking their voice was broken. Oh, and they weren't even told it was an experiment. It wasn't revealed to the public until the 2000s. That's right, this literal psychological sabotage was kept quiet for decades, probably under the category, "Oops, maybe we shouldn't have done that." It's called the monster study, and not because of what it studied, but because of how monstrous the methods were. So yeah, next time you trip over your words during a meeting, just be grateful no 1930s psychologist is hiding behind your cubicle with a clipboard and childhood trauma. Number 2, the Aversion Project. You know what really screams trustworthy government oversight? Chemical castration and electric shock therapy. Said no one ever. Welcome to apartheid-era South Africa, where the military decided they didn't just need soldiers, they needed heterosexual soldiers. So they came up with a very on-brand for evil plan, the Aversion Project. In the 1970s and 80s, army doctors would identify young men suspected of being gay, often just based on rumors or behavior that didn't scream ultra-macho, and then treat them. And by treat, I mean force them into electroshock therapy while showing them gay porn, as if making their brain associate attraction with pain would flip the switch to straight. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But it did mess people up for life, and if that wasn't enough, some victims were chemically castrated or subjected to forced sex change operations. You read that correctly. The military literally Frankenstein-ed people who didn't fit their mold and then tried to pretend it never happened. The whole thing was hidden under the rug until whistleblowers and human rights investigators started digging in the 1990s. And surprise, turns out torturing people over who they're attracted to doesn't age well in the court of history. The Aversion Project is one of those cases where psychology wasn't used to understand or help, it was weaponized to control and erase. Like big yikes with a side of war crimes. Number 3, Operation Midnight Climax. If you think the CIA has always been buttoned up, boring, and all about files and suits, let me introduce you to the time they ran a government-funded LSD brothel. Yep. In the 1950s and 60s, as part of the infamous MK Ultra program, aka Let's Drug People and See What Happens, the CIA launched Operation Midnight Climax. It sounds like a bad action movie. It was somehow worse. They literally rented apartments in San Francisco and New York, paid sex workers to bring in unsuspecting clients, then dosed those men with LSD without their knowledge. Meanwhile, agents sat behind two-way mirrors, sipping martinis and taking notes like creepy science voyeurs. The goal? To see if mind control was possible. Can we manipulate someone into revealing secrets under the influence? Can we break a person just right to reprogram them? Plot twist: no, you can't. But you can deeply traumatize a lot of people while violating every ethical boundary ever written. This wasn't revealed until the 1970s, when congressional hearings exposed the CIA's basement full of drug-fueled paranoia and questionable decisions. And even then, most of the records had already been shredded. Convenient, so next time someone jokes about being watched by the government, maybe don't laugh too hard, because once upon a time they actually did that through peepholes and acid trips. Number 4, the pit of despair. No cute metaphors here. That was literally the name of the device. In the 1970s, psychologist Harry Harlow, famous for his monkey experiments on love and attachment, decided to explore what happens when you take love away completely. Spoiler, it gets real dark real fast. He took infant rhesus monkeys and put them in a steel isolation chamber, basically a vertical box with slippery sides so they couldn't climb out. No light, no touch, no sound, just total sensory deprivation. For weeks, he called it the pit of despair, which, if you're naming your experiment like it's the title of a 9 Inch Nails album, maybe stop and rethink everything. The monkeys predictably became catatonic. Some stopped eating, others just rocked back and forth in psychological agony. Even when later placed with other monkeys, they couldn't recover. They were too far gone. Some never made it out mentally. Harlow's goal: to study depression and the effects of isolation. And yes, we learned a lot about how vital connection is, but also we permanently broke a bunch of monkeys to figure that out. So maybe not the most ethically brilliant path. In modern psychology, the pit of despair is often used as a cautionary tale, not just about isolation, but about what happens when curiosity crosses into cruelty and no one stops it. Number 5, the Three Christs of Ipsellante. Imagine being locked in a psychiatric hospital with two other people who all claim to be Jesus. No, this isn't the start of a theology-themed sitcom. This actually happened. In the late 1950s, psychologist Milton Rokach thought he had a brilliant idea. What if we put three delusional men, all convinced they're the literal Son of God, in a room together and just watched what happened? This took place in Ipsellante State Hospital in Michigan, where three men suffering from paranoid schizophrenia were brought together for over 2 years. Rokach believed that confronting them with conflicting delusions might snap them out of their own. You know, the classic mirrors on mirrors approach to mental health. It did not go well. Instead of abandoning their beliefs, each man simply restructured reality to accommodate the others. One claimed the other two were dead and being operated by machines. Another thought the others were insane patients impersonating Jesus to test him. And the third, well, he mostly argued a lot and kept calling the others crazy. Oh, and here's the kicker. Rokach also manipulated them. He wrote fake letters from imaginary people. He fed them fake news stories. He pushed and poked their realities just to see what would give, which is a fancy way of saying he emotionally tormented them for academic curiosity. Eventually, he published the book The Three Christs of Ipsellante and admitted later that the experiment was ethically messed up. Shocker. Turns out playing psychological chess with people who already believe they're divine is not peak therapeutic strategy. So, moral of the story, if someone thinks they're Jesus, maybe don't throw them into a theological battle royale for entertainment. Number 6, the Well of Loneliness. Because the pit of despair wasn't bad enough, let's talk about its emotional cousin, the Well of Loneliness. No, it's not a rejected emo album title, it was yet another Harry Harlow special. This one involved taking baby monkeys that had bonded with their mother, real or fake, and then yanking them away and isolating them completely in a dark, confined space for up to a year. No social contact, no affection. Just echoing silence and despair. When the monkeys were finally brought out, some refused to eat, others mutilated themselves, many never recovered, their social skills were obliterated. They couldn't form attachments or care for offspring later in life. And yes, some of their babies also suffered because trauma doesn't stop with one generation. Yay, science. Harlow justified it by saying he wanted to study the impact of love deprivation and attachment disorders, which, sure, we got data. But at what cost? It's like asking, how bad is loneliness? And then launching a psychological nuke to find out. In modern circles, this study is often cited as the origin story of the modern animal rights movement. Because when you start naming experiments Well of Loneliness, you've officially stopped pretending this is for the greater good. You're just sadism with a lab coat. So yeah, if a scientist ever suggests putting anyone in a place named Well of Loneliness, maybe call the ethics board immediately. Number 7, the Bystander Effect. Live on tape. You're walking down the street and see someone collapse. Do you rush in, or do you wait, hoping someone else jumps first? Welcome to the Bystander Effect, aka the part of your brain that assumes other people will do the responsible thing, so you don't have to. Psychologists Ipsellante and John Darley studied this in the 1960s after the infamous murder of Kitty Genovese in New York, where it was reported that dozens of people heard her screaming and did nothing. Turns out the story was exaggerated, but the panic was real. To test it, the researchers staged emergencies, fake seizures, smoke-filled rooms, staged falls, while secretly observing who helped and when. Unsurprisingly, people were way more likely to help if they thought they were the only witness. But once others were around, most just froze or looked confused. Turns out our moral courage is surprisingly dependent on whether someone else makes the first move. When we feel anonymous in a crowd, we assume someone else is in charge. It's like emotional outsourcing for emergencies. The experiments themselves weren't horrific, no monkeys or electroshock devices this time, but the results were disturbing. Because the scary part wasn't that people were evil, it's that they were passive. frozen by social context and fear of standing out. So yeah, next time you see something sketchy, don't wait for a crowd cue. Channel your inner action hero and be the someone. Your ancestors didn't survive predators by forming polite observation circles. Number 8. The Good Samaritan Experiment. Speaking of standing around awkwardly while someone suffers, let's talk about the time psychologists decided to prank theology students with morality. In 1973, psychologists John Darley, yes, again, and Daniel Batson conducted an experiment at Princeton Theological Seminary, you know, the place where future clergy go to become paragons of compassion. They asked students to give a talk in another building. Some were told to discuss the parable of the Good Samaritan, you know, the literal story about helping strangers in need. Others got a different topic. Some were told they were late. Others had time. Then came the trap. On the path between buildings, they planted an actor slumped in a doorway, coughing, groaning, and clearly in distress. So did the future men of God stop to help, only if they weren't in a hurry. Those told they were late, most walked right past, even while preparing to speak about helping others. One reportedly even stepped over the groaning man. Yes, over. The lesson? Your moral compass might point true until your calendar screams, run. Context matters more than you'd think. Being good isn't just about beliefs. It's about timing, pressure, and whether or not you skipped breakfast. Darley and Batson didn't traumatize anyone here for once, but they did uncover something unsettling. You can believe in doing good and still fail the test when it counts most. So if you ever wonder whether you'd be the person who stops to help, well, hope you're not late for anything. Number 9. The Robbers Cave Experiment. Ah yes, the experiment that proves middle school summer camp is just a few steps away from Lord of the Flies. In 1954, social psychologist Muzafer Sheriff brought 22 11-year-old boys, all white, all middle class, all totally unaware they were entering a psychological war zone, to a summer camp in Robbers Cave State Park, Oklahoma. But this wasn't your typical capture the flag camp. This was social engineering with bunk beds. The boys were split into 2 groups. Each had no idea the other existed at first. They bonded within their teams, created names, the Rattlers and the Eagles, flags, chants, the whole tribal identity package. Then Sheriff introduced them to each other and immediately set up competitions. Tug-of-war, baseball, scavenger hunts. What followed was chaos. Taunting, food fights, raids, burning each other's flags, even fistfights. Here's the kicker, it was all manipulated. Sheriff deliberately provoked conflict just to watch tribalism emerge. But then he flipped the script and introduced shared problems like a broken water supply and a truck stuck in mud that could only be solved by cooperation. And you know what? It worked. The boys started helping each other, sharing meals and riding the same bus home, probably unaware they had just been part of a masterclass in group psychology. This experiment, as ethically fuzzy as it was, revealed 2 major truths about humanity. We will absolutely form in-groups and start hating the other with almost zero prompting. But with shared goals and mutual struggle, that hatred can dissolve. So if you're wondering why people online fight over literally everything, just remember, all it takes is a tug-of-war match and 1 burned flag to turn kids into a mob. Or adults into Twitter. Number 10. Project MK Ultra. Let's finish strong with a government-funded nightmare so weird, so paranoid, and so real, it sounds like a rejected X-Files script. Project MK Ultra, also known as What If the CIA Took a Bunch of Drugs and Lost Its Mind. From the 1950s to the early 1970s, the CIA launched a top-secret program to explore mind control. No, seriously, they wanted to know if they could brainwash people using drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and whatever sketchy tactics hadn't already been banned by the Geneva Convention. They used LSD, a lot of LSD, dosing people without consent. Sometimes they spiked drinks at parties. Other times, they targeted prisoners, patients in psychiatric hospitals, even CIA employees themselves. One guy, Frank Olson, was unknowingly dosed and later fell out of a window in what some believe wasn't exactly an accident. There were attempts to erase memories, implant false ones, and break personalities into programmable shells. It was like trying to turn humans into sleeper agents using vibes and paranoia. The program was shut down in the mid-70s when Congress started asking too many questions. By then, most documents were destroyed. The rest? Enough to prove the US government spent decades playing mad scientist on unsuspecting civilians. MK Ultra has since become the ultimate conspiracy theory touchstone because it wasn't just a theory. It happened. And it taught us that science without oversight isn't just unethical, it's terrifying. So yeah, if you ever get nervous around government acronyms, there's a reason. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.